Morning, folks. We're about to get started. I want to welcome everyone today here at Kane University for the second part of our three-part series on Business Succession Forum. My name is Dan Reardon. I'll be the moderator for today. It's my honor to be here with the esteemed colleagues here, a panel of 5. And again, we thank you all for coming today. For those that are watching via webinar, we also welcome you also. As I said, my name is Dan Reardon. I'm with UBS Financial Services. I'm a member of Certis Financial Group. And we're a 9-person practice based in Florham Park with offices also in New York City. We provide comprehensive wealth management to business owners in the middle markets. And I specialize particularly in the area of corporate retirement planning and then life insurance, estate planning, and general financial planning. So a little about Middle Market Business Advisory Network Group that are here assembled today. We're comprised of a select group of exclusive individuals in various disciplines working with middle market owners and businesses and families through the entire process of exiting a business. And that's basically what business succession planning is all about, is that ultimately a business owner will exit at some point. There'll be various forms discussed there of how that will take place and how it has taken place in the past. There are core groups that are a part of this panel today and part of our group as a whole. And we have attorneys that specialize in transactional and estate planning. One of our speakers today is an estate planning specialist. We have CPAs who do M&A and tax work, investment bankers, present today as well, and business and transition planning advisory services, and investment wealth advisors like myself and one of my colleagues and partners, Ray Chase, that's here today on the panel. So what's our mission here at the Middle Market Business Advisory Network Group? It's to educate and service middle market business owners by providing collaborative advisory services and value-added solutions that address their needs throughout the entire life cycle of moving beyond the business they've built and run for many years, and it's getting them over that next stage to the next part of their life. As I mentioned, this is our second part of the series. We met here in this very same room at Kane on October 4th, and that was really the overview meeting where we provided just the basic framework for what we're going to discuss today, and then the subsequent series, that's the 25th in the same room, and a middle market update, what was going on in the middle markets, the statistics of what's happening in the business place, the cycle in the business community we're currently at. And I want to mention that again, that the previous presentation is available via YouTube channel, which we'll send out via link to everybody if you haven't got it yet, and it'll also be the same for today's presentation. So you'll be prepared to see that as well. And then our next time we'll meet again is here on Thursday, the 15th of November, where we'll be discussing the transition plan and life thereafter. So a recap of the last session. Let me put the slides. That would probably help, right? I already introduced myself, told you what we're about. Okay, and the recap of the first session. Not a surprise, folks, that 70-80% of the privately owned businesses don't sell. They go on the market and they don't sell. That's a staggering number, 70-80%, meaning only 20 to 30 actually do sell. 30% of all family-owned businesses survive to the second generation, 12% to the third, and 3% to the fourth. So you can see here that the success in moving on from a business is not really high. There's a lot of reasons for that. We're going to get into that today. Some are expectation gaps. You know, my business is worth X. The owner believes he or she that they've put their 30 years or so onto the business. It's worth X, and they want that number. That may not be reality. The business isn't attractive or even ready. We're going to talk about that today. Readiness and preparedness is a big part of it. Competitive, savvy marketplace. Buyers and acquirers on the other side are real savvy, and they're not going to pay for something that they don't believe it's worth. They're going to make sure they get the right value on their end as the buyer. Owner not prepared, very big one, personally and corporately speaking. This is, like I said, they've been working 30, 40 years running this organization, this company. It's been their whole life's work, and they're not sure what they're going to do with their lives thereafter, and they haven't even got their business in order to sell it. And it dovetails back to why they don't sell. Like I said earlier, 70-80% don't even sell. And the stats on those that do are staggering and getting to the second, third generation. Sell price reduction at due diligence. A savvy market buyer is going to look really deeply at a business and take their time and not make a rash decision. And they might be a steep discount at the end. You think it's worth X, and they find out they're willing to pay Y for it. So there can be a disconnect there. But the key thing here today we're going to cover is that 100% of all privately owned businesses will transition. At some point, that owner, that ownership group, management team will not be running that company at some point in time. And how they remove themselves or exit the business is going to be varied, and we'll cover some of those things today. But certainly you can all take away today that 100% of the businesses will transition The ownership will transition at some point. So again, a further recap of session one, majority of business owners don't have. What don't they have? An understanding of the value of the business. Someone may phone them and call them and say, hey, I think, I'd like to buy your company. We have some guests here today who've received that call, and they say, oh, that sounds like a good number, but they don't really know that, right? They're just getting that out of the thin air, and someone might just be trying to put a flyer number out to somebody, and they'll say, oh, that sounds great, I'll sell it to you for that. They don't have the transition of their business in their estate plan. It's not even part of their planning process. They haven't really talked to their estate attorney. We have one here on the panel today. They haven't talked to their wealth advisor about, hey, here's what I'm thinking. They don't have a contingency plan or succession place in their own place of business. They're running these companies. They're usually the maverick, the visionary who's run this business, and they tend to just kind of hold it to it real tightly, and they don't have the right management structure in place or identified key people in the organization that can potentially take the baton and run with the company. They don't have an idea what their life's going to look like post transition. What am I going to do when I have all this time that I didn't have while I was running the company? That's another key factor. People don't really take time to really consider deeply what I will do with my life when I have all this time. And it's different for everybody. Some could be just vacationing and relaxing, and some could be doing other things, entrepreneurial, but that's a part of the process that needs to be addressed as well. And having a transition advisory team, that's really the crux of what this is all about, putting the right collaborative team of professionals that work in concert to help a business owner or a management team, a family structure, to make their plan. And they don't actually have, the key bullet point at the end is an actual transition plan. Do they actually have a plan? And we find out more often than not, they don't. And that's the reason why the stats are somewhat soft in terms of successful business transitioning. And the facts are, without having all these things in place, is really a recipe for disaster or an exit that would not be ideal for a business owner. And we're here today to help folks understand and educate them that there is a better way to go about it, a methodical way with the right advisory team and all the research that we all bring to the table that we can help. So what is transition, succession planning, and exit planning? It's a long question, but it's a number of different things. It combines plan, the concept, the effort, and the process into a clear, simple strategy to build a business that is transferable through strong human capital, structural, customer, and social capital. It's all those things comprised. It's just not one. You just can't, like baking a cake, you leave out an ingredient. Obviously, we know what the outcome might be like. So we really need to really collaboratively put all those pieces together. And that's what members of this panel is about. So if you look at this little graphic here, also it mentions here, it aligns the business personally aligns the business personal and financial needs of the owner. Again, it's a collaborative process, as we'll see on the next slide, which is really critical. If you look here, you see like a hub and spoke kind of thing here, where it's typically the business owners in the center, and then you have the satellite approach, or the spokes as we call it, and it's all these professionals. It's the CPA, it's the tax advisor, it's the M&A advisor, it's the wealth advisor, it's the estate planner, et cetera, and they're not coordinated. So the business owner has all these external relationships, but they don't speak together. We see that quite often, that we're never really introduced at the same time, or we don't really collaborate on it. So if you look at the next schematic, it really shows what we believe is a better way to go about it. Business owner at the center still, steering the ship per se, but getting the advice and the counsel of a collaborative group of professionals that are represented in that lower box there. You can see from estate planning, the insurance agent, the wealth manager, investment banker, CPA, board of advisors, if there is one, and then a business attorney. And there could be a couple others, but those are the key folks in that collaboration unit that really need to be a part of it. And from the start, as opposed to, as I said, with the hub and spoke, where no one's really coordinating the efforts and talking together. It's usually more reactive than it is proactive. So that's what we really believe that in our organization, it's really important for business owners to have that type of structure. So without further ado, you've heard enough from me. I'm just briefly going to mention we have 5 presenters here this morning from various disciplines. I'm going to take a moment to introduce each one of them, tell you a little about their biography, and they're also going to get right into the meat and potatoes of what their area of expertise is. We have Jeff Cates, who's going to be our first presenter this morning. Jeff is the founder of Founders Group, rather. It's a multinational advisory firm based in California, but he operates on the East Coast here. Jeff has an MBA, and he also has a degree from undergraduate degree in Canada. He's a Canadian resident, well, not a resident, but he's from Canada originally, residing here. But on the agenda, before I get more into, hand over to Jeff, is that there's 4 key questions that business owners really have to ask themselves, and Jeff's going to share what they are today, and then it's about wealth and personal preparedness, and then business preparedness. I've said that once or twice, but those are the really, really key drivers that we're going to hit home on today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass along to Jeff. Jeff, I need to give you this device here, and you take it from there.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everybody. And for those watching on the webinar, good morning to you as well. Thank you, Dan, for that. And I'll just say briefly a little bit about what we do at the Founders Group. We are a business advisory consultants to business owners. We focus on putting a whole plan together. So we deal with some of the personal stuff where we work with other advisors, but a plan has to be part and parcel of not just the business, but what do you do with that asset as part of your overall plan. So we bring the two together, and we also, where we really focus on is adding value to the business and preparing them for an eventual transition, whether it's 6 months from now or 10 years down the road. So let's get started. I can go through the bio. So similar to what Dan had up there, we take a very similar approach in that we look at everything holistically and we work collaboratively, and we keep the business owner and their family in the center of everything we do. And so from a business owner's perspective, you have the business, which is probably, in most cases, your biggest asset, but it's not a liquid asset. And then on the personal side, we deal with everything that comes up with family dynamics, wealth advisory work that we work with other advisors on as they look to have a plan for that, and everything that relates to insurance, long-term care for spouses or parents. It's all part and parcel of a business owner's life, and we work towards handling that in concert. So really the 4 questions we're going to ask today, okay, and those are: where are you now? Where are you going? How are you going to get there? And then what's next? The where are you now is really what's your business look like today, and also your personal life. Where do you stand today? Are you looking to exit today? Are you looking to exit 5, 10 years from now? Do you have an estate plan set up? Do you have your money with a wealth advisor? Do you know where everything is? And then from the businesses, what's the value of your business worth today? Okay, where are you going is what's your vision? What are your goals? Okay, that's where we get into the meat and potatoes of lifestyle choices and where you see the business. And that's where we peel the onion back and we really get into sometimes some of the root causes of symptoms that are either going on in the business or even personally. And only once you've understood where you are and where you're going can you then get to, all right, how are you going to get there? Which is where we create all that value enhancement initiatives and we work to improve the value of the business. And finally is the decision. What are we going to do? Now, it's counterintuitive, but most people put the decision up front. They go, okay, let's go, I'm ready to sell. And they start with that. And those are when we see those instances where just a lot of times it doesn't work because there's been no preparedness. So those are going to be the questions we ask today. So the first one is, where are you now? And if you know, it's hard to see here, but there's a process that we go through that's very specific, and we find that with business owners, it's always about process, right? Because having a process when you're either running a business or for anything keeps you on focus and keeps you on track. So we're going to go through it now, the where are you now? So where are you now is, do you know the value of your business today? What do you do? Have you had a business valuation before? If you haven't, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage because you're not open to opportunities that may present themselves. If a competitor comes to you today and says, we want to acquire you, and they tell you we want to give you X, and you don't know what the value of your business is, do you have any idea whether or not you should say yes to that or no? You shouldn't. You have no clue as to what the value of your business is to say, I'm getting a premium or I'm getting a discount, right? What are the motives of that potential buyer, right? They may be offering you a 50% premium because they have a strategy in place that they're looking to do, right? But you don't know that if you don't know the value of your business today. So having a comprehensive business valuation where you're looking at IP, intellectual property as part of the overall valuation, that can be where some of the biggest value of the company is. But that has to be valued, and there are ways to do that. by credentialed valuators, which is, very important, then a ballpark, our business is worth around 5 million or 8 million. Well, maybe it's worth 15 to somebody, to the right person. So understanding the value of your business today is absolutely critical, we feel, before proceeding with any kind of decision on how to transition. In addition, assessing the business is really important, and assessing your personal life is going through it with an open mind and clear eye to say, all right, from a sales perspective, our team is terrific. We have great business developers. We generate a ton of leads. We're growing at a 22% clip. Whatever the metrics are, that you understand, in different areas of the business where you're at. Do you have an inventory issue? Do you have an issue with human capital, turnover rates of employees? Do you have a management issue? All these things should be assessed to understand where you're weak and where you're strong, so that you can leverage your strengths and fix those areas that need improvement to increase the value, not only to increase EBITDA, which is important, but also increase that value to somebody coming in to say, all right, that multiple should be 6 instead of 5, or it could be 7 instead of 5. And that's where that value is created. Okay, so by doing this, we understand what we have in place, and more importantly, we have a baseline value for the business moving forward, so that it's kind of like having a projection next, with you. If business owners should be using projections to have an idea of where they're going to be at in 6 months, in 3 months, in a year. Well, same with the business valuation is, what's my business worth? Every year they should have an understanding of what their biggest asset is worth. Having that valuation is also used to determine what that business could be worth in a couple of years. Is, all right, I'm thinking about that transition, and maybe it's 2 years down the road, all right? And what's it worth today, and what's that delta, right? So based on where you're at today, you can try and see where you're headed to in terms of a value, right? If it's worth 10 million today and we can add $1 million to EBITDA and increase the multiple by X, it's going to be worth this in 2 years. And oftentimes those improvements that are led to it do generate significant value. The other thing you're doing is you're peeling the onion back. Okay? By digging in through the valuation and doing these assessments, you're uncovering maybe issues you didn't realize. You're working with management to figure out what's going on in certain areas, and a lot of truth comes out through these assessments that are done, and by area. And it's interesting to get different perspectives, because what you think is happening in one area may not be in fact actually happening in the business, or even personally, right? If you're not having discussions with your spouse or your kids about what's going on, maybe you have a son or a daughter in the business. Do they want to be in the business? Maybe they're doing it out of the sense of loyalty. Maybe that's not what they want to be doing, but they're doing it to help you. That is uncovered through these processes. I'm going to skip over this because I talked about a lot of this. But actually, I want to mention a few things. Is having that preparedness and readiness, it gives you some clarity to some of your goals towards what's your legacy? What do you want to leave behind as you transition? Maybe it's not important to you, and that's okay. Maybe it's charity. What do you want to do after you sell? It's not the end for anybody. It can be just the beginning. Do you want to open a new business? Do you want to travel? Do you want to spend time with grandkids? Do you want, there's a million things that can be done post this chapter, depending on where you're at. You could be a young businessman or woman at 28 years of age selling your first business. Well, you're not done. So what's next? Is it another business? Is it maybe just taking a bite of the apple now and staying in it and having another chance to get more out of it later? There's a lot of these options, and seeking clarity helps to figure out what's going to happen next, which is the where are you going? Okay, so now you have an idea of what the business is worth, and you've uncovered some issues in the business around whatever those areas may be, and you've figured out some stuff personally in terms of what you don't have or what you do have. You know, do you have a contingency plan? Are you adequately covered from an insurance perspective? But now it's, all right, where are you going? What is your plan? What is your vision for both the business and for yourself and your family personally? And that's what we deal with next, okay? These are sessions that are done with the business owner and their family on the personal side, and then with the business owner and the management team on the business side. And these are sessions that are designed to provide some clarity as to, it's basically almost like a SWOT analysis, but with more in-depth drill down into what is going on in the business. And you're hearing it from your perspective as a business owner, and also from the people running the business on a day-to-day basis, other than yourself. And what comes out of these sessions is this unbelievable pride that business owners feel when they're working with their management team, and they see the level of commitment that some of these managers bring to the table, and their desire to make the business better and be part of something. And it becomes very powerful, and it adds a lot of energy to the business. It also provides clarity, because only when you see what your future is going to look like and a plan is developed, can you now go ahead and start to implement it. So putting that plan together is done in these sessions. And they're done by really drilling down into those areas that need to be focused on. And what comes out of it are these initiatives and clarity as to what are we going to work on in the next 30, 60, 90 days. You know, are we going to focus on developing a sales team because we're really weak there? You know, are we going to focus on marketing? Do we have operational issues with our RFP system, our request for proposals? Maybe we're in a business where we issue quotes and we realize that, wow, our quoting system is horrible and we're leaving a lot of money on the table. So, excuse me, it depends on what is uncovered that helps you to define where it is that you're going to go and find how we're going to get there. We look for that last 10%. So oftentimes in both the business and personally, you're seeing symptoms. There are issues within the family dynamic, within the business, and you know they're there, but you may not understand why they're there. And by going through these sessions, usually the truth comes out. And it can be very painful, and it can be very difficult. A lot of tears, a lot of soul searching. But that's where that last 10% usually presents itself. And once it comes out, we see a lot of times with business owners that weight is lifted. Finally, they've been able to talk about it. You know, they've been able to talk about the fact that they don't want their children in the business, but they're there, and that's not what they wanted for themselves. Sometimes they talk about gambling problems, all right, that are affecting the business, and that comes out on the table. We've seen so much stuff over the years, I can't even begin to tell you. But all these issues usually end up being displayed, and once they're on the table, that's when healing starts, and you're starting to move the business forward and those relationships forward personally that you're putting together. Now we can build a plan. So we want to figure out how we're going to get there. So this is an interesting table, okay? It's basically the 5 stages of business. And in that first stage, really, you see how the owner is involved in everything as it relates to the business. And for small businesses especially, we see that a lot, is that the owner is involved in the vision and drive of the business, but they're also involved in engaging the customers and attracting them. They're involved in the process. They're involved in every decision that's being made. And then the team goes out and does whatever the owner tells them to do. Really, where you want to be is in stage 5. That's what adds the most value to a company for an outside investor or for whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, which is, all right, I'm not even in the business anymore because I've built a management team and a leadership team that can run the business without me, okay? Then the team goes and executes it. And I'm just there either collecting a check or I'm out doing something else because I've put into place everything that needed to be done. And as a result, that's when the value is created, because somebody coming in says, okay, I'm not buying the business owner, I'm buying the company. All right, and that adds a ton of value because they don't need you going forward because you're not part of their plans going forward anyway. All right, when a strategic buyer is coming in, they're transitioning you out within 6 to 12 months at best. Right, you sign a contract for 2 years, but I can count on one hand the business owners that have made it through a full term of their contract post-transition. It doesn't usually happen for various reasons. So getting to that stage 5 is where you want to be. And you'd be surprised that most businesses are not there. Certainly in the lower market, from that 5 to 50 million, there are very few businesses that are at that stage. Some of the bigger businesses certainly are at maybe 3 or 4, but it's very interesting to see. So this is where I ask business owners some questions, is what do you identify with? What stage? Where are you at? Right? Is the business star-based? Do you have a vision for the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? All right? Is your messaging clear and concise in your business? Can you take 3 to 4 weeks off and be okay with how the business will be run while you're gone? Do you have SMART goals? That's specific, measurable, actionable, what are the other two? Timely, and I forget what R is right now. Sorry about that. And what's your business, what are you going to do post-transition? These are all questions that need to be asked. Once that's done and a plan is developed, we get into, all right, how are you going to get there? All right? And how you get there is by making these changes that you have identified in areas that need to occur. Whether it's de-risking the business by having a buy-sell agreement, let's say, or is it we need to hire 6 new people and revamp the sales team, or we need new products and we have an issue with our R&D team. Whatever the case may be, whatever is identified, we now go in there and look to make those improvements. Okay? We're getting buy-in from the team, from the owner, from all stakeholders, which is very important. And now we're starting to increase the enterprise value of the business, and we're building off of those sessions. Now, we do this over a 90-day sprint. Why? Because you can't take focus away from the day-to-day running of the business. The reason most businesses can't do it themselves is because they've already got a full-time job running the business. And these kind of initiatives have to be done concurrently and in conjunction. If we hand them 20 to do, it's not going to get done. We keep it very focused on 3 to 5, and we get that train out of the station and start to move it. What we're doing is we're increasing EBITDA, and as a result, we're increasing the value of the business. We're also looking to move that multiple, improve the culture and morale, and we prepare the business for that transition. Okay? As the value increases, how we do it is we start with the de-risking, because that's most important, is protect what you have. De-risk the business immediately. Contingency plans, succession plans, insurance, whatever other issues are on the table, estate plans, stuff that needs to get done immediately. Then we focus on the strategy. Then we get into the efficiencies and the operations. Then, only then, do you look at growth and finally develop that culture. Make it a best-in-class business. Work on the human capital, the structural capital, the customer capital. And that's what increases that tangible value, but also the intangible value. That's where the IP and process helps add value to that business. And by doing that, by working on the EBITDA and the multiple, you've increased the value exponentially. As a quick example, let's say there's a company doing $2 million of EBITDA with a 4 multiple. The business is worth $8 million today. So over the next year to 2 years, you've now increased EBITDA by $1 million. Okay? So now the new EBITDA is at 3, but it's not worth 12. You've also increased the multiple to 6. So now that business is worth $18 million on a $1 million increase in EBITDA, or 50%. But you've grown the business by $10 million. I mean, it's powerful, very powerful stuff to be able to do in advance of a transition. That's where you're maximizing that value for yourself and for your family and for the legacy. I'm going to skip through some of these questions. some business owners should be asking, because I want to get into the final process, which is why everybody's here is what's next? That decision. What are we going to do with the business? You've added value now. You've taken care of your plan. You've mitigated risk. Now what do? A lot of times business owners aren't ready to sell. They want to keep it. That's not to say not to have a plan in place, but now they're not ready to transition because the business is spitting off cash flow and they're happy. The business is now humming, right? Now they enjoy coming to work where they didn't a year ago. So you're not always looking, and that's okay. Having the plan there to be present for opportunities that present themselves can be just as valuable an option as selling. All right, and if you're going to sell, is it going to be internal or external? And that was discussed in the last presentation. It'll be discussed again, all these different options. The internal options are management buyouts, passing it on to second generation, external strategic buyers, financial investors. Okay, and what's that time frame? So you're looking through those options and you're developing that plan. Now we can say, all right, we're going to take it to an auction. We're going to put it out there, and we're going to have an M&A guy like Michael come in, and we're going to bid it out. We're going to see what we can get, kind of like selling a house to multiple buyers. We're going to see what happens. So at that time, you're doing these new business valuations. To now let's see what the business is worth today. You've developed an advisory team. You're working with them, and now the plan is in place to make that decision. And once that decision is made, now we got to deal with creating a slide deck and a book for a marketing package, and due diligence, which will be discussed both today and I believe next week as well, or next presentation, is we have due diligence to do, and that's on the business side and legal. All right, you got to build a war room. You have to have all the documents in place, because if you can control that process and have that checklist done and all the documents, whatever offer is made at that letter of intent by an outside investor, you want it to stick. If they're offering you $30 million for the business, you don't want to end up with 22 by the time they're done. You want to end up with 30, or as close to it as possible. And that's what putting together that deck is. So I know it was quick and we covered a lot, but really going through those 4 questions to me is imperative prior to making any decision on what you want to do with your business. But you have to have a plan in place and a process in place to deal with it, because that transition is coming whether you like it or not. And hopefully it's not coming sooner, but if it does, you have to be ready for it. Thanks.
Any questions for Jeff? Jeff, just a quick comment. Thank you for the content. It was fabulous. A lot of stuff, folks. Unpacked a lot in a short period of time. I've heard this adage, you can only eat an elephant one bite at a time, and we heard a lot of material today. There's a lot of stuff on the deck. Where would you say a business owner, regardless of where he or she might be, whether in the room or watching via webinar, where would they start, honestly? You had the 4 questions. And were they in sequence, Jeff, or could you say one question of the 4 is the starting point?
Yeah, so here's the thing. The process is designed so that it's like a train going through these stations. You can hop on anywhere, but really you should come back to the beginning. So I'll give you a quick example. A business could be in a turnaround situation or a workout situation where the company's in a lot of trouble, right? So their focus may not be on the plan today, well, how am I going to get out? It's surviving, right? So getting the business in order may be the first step, but you've got to bring it right back down to what is my value of the business today and where's my business at today? You always start with where are you now? What's that expression? You can't know where you're going till you know where you've been, right? Or you know where you are. That's key here, is you have to know where you are to be able to make any kind of informed decision and be proactive to any opportunities that present itself. So once you know where you're at today, that moves the train out of the station.
Fair enough. Thank you.
So it starts with that valuation and the assessments.
Okay. Where we are now, right now, is into the second presenter today. It's Ray Chase of Certis Financial Group, Private Wealth Management at UBS. Ray is a 30-year veteran in private wealth management. Ray has the CEPA designation, which is a Certified Exit Planning Analyst. We have a couple on the panel today. Ray is someone who works with middle market businesses at all phases and stages of their transition process from start to finish, providing comprehensive wealth management. He's a managing partner for a 9-member team, of which I'm one of them. And what Ray's going to discuss today for a few minutes that we have with him is wealth and personal preparedness. So the floor is yours, Ray.
Thanks, appreciate it, Dan. Jeff, a lot of great content there, and it probably takes a little while to digest a lot of that. I can always come back to this concept of why does the business exist in the first place? And it really is to provide for yourself and your family. You could have 10 or 15 other options in there, things that you might want to be considering, whether it be employees and your stature in the community and your legacy and all that stuff, but it's still, those are all reordered based on, each individual business owner, but the first one is always take care of myself and my family. So if you come at this from that perspective, I believe figuring out what you want for yourself and your family out of the gate is probably the most critical part of this. And that helps drive a lot of the other decision-making that takes place, when you're engaging with someone like Jeff. So really getting that tied in together. So there's a lot on this slide here, and I'm not going to read this, and maybe you won't either. That'll be fine. There's a lot there. But, the idea here is that, and I'll reinforce what Jeff had said, anything you do from a planning standpoint needs to integrate your personal, your business, and your financial world. And having a game plan that really collects all those things together and it's integrated is really the right answer. I guess the other thing I'd say is, that how do you get to that spot where you're creating that ideal vision for yourself and your family? And really that is something that is probably better done, facilitated by someone on the outside, whether it's someone like myself or otherwise. But the idea is there, you want to go through a really thorough discovery process where you're, peeling back the onion, not necessarily on the business side always, but on the personal side as well. What are your key motivations and your values, and why do you get up every day? Those are real key drivers to what and why and how you're going to ultimately transition out of that business. So, the other part of this I'd say is that you want to have your family involved in this conversation early if you can. I know sometimes that's touchy and it's difficult because sometimes you have family members that are involved in the business and others that are not. And you have to come up with this concept of what's fair and what's equitable. And it's not always a 50-50 because that has other unintended consequences that can kick in. So, and then finally, I think on the preparation side, where are you going to be afterwards? And have you really thought through what your life looks like after you're done? And have you done an assessment of that aspect of it? Have a business plan for that. I mean, it's kind of the same idea. Think through what are the key important things that are to you, whether it be travel, kids, grandkids, all that stuff. But how are you going to fill your time, and what's going to be the most fulfilling for you? So you can't just show up that day. And I said at the last meeting, you're sitting at the breakfast table at 7:30 in the morning, and you're the only one sitting there because the rest of the family's out doing things, and they have a life too. So you need to draw them into this and re-engage. Second thing I probably touch on here is what our role in this whole process is to understand where you want to go. And, Jeff and his group and other people on the panel here help you get there from the business perspective, but where do you want to get to? And, having this modeling done for cash flows as to what kind of business sales structure makes sense to net the best after-tax number for the family. How do you go about doing that? And having someone like a professional planner engaging with you and taking you through that process to say, okay, we have maybe an ESOP, what does that look like? Or we have a sale to a private equity person or firm. We have an auction like Jeff had mentioned. What are the tax implications of all these things, and how does that impact the family and their goals for the future? So it's really tying back into that personal goal thing. So you might get to the point where saying, I'd love to sell this business today, but I need X to get there, and the business valuation isn't there. And maybe there's a 3 to 5 year on-ramp to get that done, and that's where you engage with a business consultant or an investment banker, just to help create concepts and ideas as to how do you boost the value of that business. And it's not just the earnings, it's how do you increase that multiple. Those are two levers that, the main levers that you have. So what I'm going to do is, you really have to have a disciplined process when you're talking about personal planning. And so I'll just share with you kind of how we define wealth management. It's an overused term, and I brought this up last time, but we define wealth management as you basically have investment management, advanced planning, and relationship management. That's how we define it. And under the investment management, it's what you'd expect. It's the creation and management of portfolios driven by the goals and values of and risk tolerances of the client. The advanced planning side of things is a little more in-depth, where you start talking about wealth enhancement, which is really making sure your cash flows keep pace with what your spend looks like, mitigating income taxes. Then we have wealth transfer, which is more of the estate planning thing that Steve will touch on in a few minutes here. Then we walk on to basically keeping the risk down in your personal life. You don't want to be spending all this time creating this economic value for your family, only to have it taken unjustly through litigation or liability exposure. So making sure you have that buttoned down well is important. And lastly, charitable giving. It's not important for everybody, but a lot of the people we work with it is. And how do we advise clients to help magnify the impact of that for people? So, relationship management, it's basically how do you interact with your wealth management team. That's usually, we leave that to the client to define. But how many meetings, how many reviews, outbound phone calls, how do you like to be contacted, electronically, or verbally, or face-to-face? So it's that kind of structure that you're creating there. And then also the professional network, and I'll get into that in a second, but managing the team of advisors for our clients, we do a fair amount of that. Next part here is the consultative process. So as I said, having a disciplined approach, and Jeff touched on this too, true on the business side, true on the personal side. Have a structure where you get on that train at the right spot and go through the stations. For our purposes, the wealth management process starts with a discovery meeting. This could be an hour and a half to 2 hours long, where we're trying to learn as much as we can about the client, and it covers really 8 areas. Really only about 3 of the 8 are financial, and the rest of them are really more qualitative. So we're talking about values and goals. We're talking about family relationships, and we want to understand who those people are in that person's life that are important to them, whether they be parents, siblings, children, family members outside of that, friends, coworkers, that kind of thing. So we want to understand who those important people are in that person's life. We want to know who the outside advisors are. The CPAs and attorneys, and that crowd that are engaging with that client on a day-to-day basis. So we can bring those people in when we need them. Third, fourth, here you have basically a process. How do we engage with those clients? We want to know what their interests are as well. So really delving into that person, understanding them as best we can. And lastly, along those lines, talking about what they do when they're not working. What do they do for fun? What's of interest to them? So that's the discovery meeting, and that really kind of kicks off the whole process for us, where we'll go back, create a plan draft, and then re-engage with that client on an investment plan meeting. We'll talk about what's going on there. The next step in this process is the mutual commitment meeting, which is really to say that after that second meeting with them, we want to send them home and let them kind of digest all the things that we talked about. We found that when clients make too quick decisions as far as engaging in a big decision like this, it usually doesn't work out as well as it could have, because questions surface later on. I'd rather have those questions surface early before we decide to work together, make sure that we're a right fit for them and they're a right fit for us. Along this next part here is this professional network. There's a lot of people involved in this, but basically we've created a group of people, some of which are here today, where we engage with them on a quarterly basis with client situations. And the objective here is to get an outside perspective, a second opinion on different aspects of estate planning, CPA and tax side things, life insurance, property casualty, all those things, those core 4 there, I'd say. So, and then beyond that, when we're working with business owners, we're bringing in investment bankers, M&A attorneys and so forth, to make sure that we have the right team involved. And what we'll do with that is it gives us a work list to go back to the client with that we work on over the course of some time. So that's about all I had for today. But I guess the underlying thing here is that we want to have a disciplined process to do this here. So.
Any questions for Ray at the moment? We'll hold them to the end. Ray, thank you for that. Great information. I've heard that many times. I've been working with Ray for 15 years, so it's I probably could have done that better than I opened on the as the moderator today. What I heard actually, and you all heard as well, is the real question that I don't think many of us ask, and maybe we do, and we're just afraid to say it publicly, is that why does my business exist? It's almost like a rhetorical question. Well, it exists so I can feed my family. It exists so I can keep people employed, and it's different for everybody. But, I guess, Ray, would that be a real question that people really should start with as it relates to your area in the panel here today? Is it really asking why I am and where I want to be, where Jeff was, where am I now? Where's my business now? I can't know where I'm going unless I know where I am. That's on the business side, but on the personal and private wealth side, the familial side, as a business owner, is it, why does my business exist? I think some would say that's an obvious question, right?
Yeah, I'd say, I personally feel that way. I mean, it is a tool. It's a tool to provide for your family. And that's really, I think, the critical thing here. So how you work with that tool and how you utilize that tool for the benefit of your family is the most important thing. I'd say for us, takeaways here, you want to start with the end in mind, which is really I've been saying all along here. Figure out where you want to get to and then backtrack to this. And that helps drive all the decision-making you're going to do around the business transition side of things. I think you got to be open to the non-financial aspects of this process. There's a lot here that's emotional and engaged, involved with your family. It's not as simple as EBITDA and multiples. There's a lot more to this, and I think you have to keep your brain a little bit open to that concept and the idea that you really have to make sure that you're bringing in all stakeholders so that everybody has a clear understanding of where you're going. The transparency matters. So.
Add to that, Dan,
Sure.
On what Ray's saying, is that it's never a fluid, it's never a static answer. Everything is fluid. So that you could ask a business owner that question is why are you in business? And if they've been in business for 30 years, the answer today is going to be much different than what it was when they first started. Right? When they first started, they may have been working out of a garage and doing stuff. Now they're responsible for feeding 200 families, let's say. It's a much, it can be a much different answer on any given day, but certainly over a period of time. And that's why that having that plan and vision is important, because you could be taking care of 250 families along the way too. So.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, the sun seems to be a problem, folks.
You okay with her?
For our meeting on the 15th, we'll bring shades, our next session.
Sunglasses.
Yeah. Thank you, folks. That's a great segue from Ray now to the panelist to his left, Steve Pagano. It's all well and good. You've got a plan. You know where you are now. You know where you want to be. You've identified the personal things in your life and why you get up every day and what you want this ultimate transition to look like, economically, personally, philanthropically, et cetera. However, if you don't have an estate planner and the right guidance there, all that could be for naught. And that's a real powerful piece here, and I think Steve's going to highlight that for us. So let me move on in this session here about preparedness more on the estate tax planning side and protecting everything you've worked for in your legacy, and how to do that effectively from a tax mitigation standpoint, and most importantly from reducing the risk in your life. And so without further ado, Steve Pagano, member of Riker Danzig, a large practice all over the country, many offices. He operates out of the Florham Park office. Steve has many years of experience in the area of estate planning. He works also in the corporate practice at Riker Danzig. One of his partners is present here today. Steve is an esteemed grad of Seton Hall University Law School in 2005. And I think for 5 or 6 consecutive years now, he's been noticed as a rising superstar on the super lawyers list here in New Jersey. So without further ado, I'll let Steve Pagano take it from here, Steve, and tell us how folks and business owners need to protect themselves while they're in the process of selling, and more importantly, even after the fact when the deal is done.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everybody. So I think obviously we're driving home preparedness, right? You got to have a plan in place, and we've already kind of hit upon a lot of reasons why that's the case. I think, unfortunately, though, everybody here would say that they see that that's not always the case. And from my experience as a trust and estates attorney and a probate litigator, you see some of the disaster situations. And that's kind of why we're trying to drive home this idea of preparedness and start thinking about things and plan ahead to try to avoid some of those bad situations. I just got a call yesterday from a potential client. Dad passed away, successful real estate business, 3 kids, everything's left to the 3 kids. 1 kid was involved in the business, other 2 not, and, dad's only gone, it seemed like maybe a month ago, and things are already kind of blowing up, and dad didn't put anything in place, nothing at all, other than a 2-page will that said, I leave everything to my 3 children equally. The conversation was interesting, and that's something that we come across a lot. So, our role here as advisors is to address those types of situations and try to avoid kind of the disaster. And when I initially meet with people, the conversation starts around just kind of a general conversation about the individual, their business, their goals, and their family. And inevitably, that individual starts talking about, okay, these are my goals. I want to, I've worked hard in my life. I built this business. I want to make sure that I'm increasing the value, building the value, and passing that value on to my family. At the same time, I want it to go to my family, not to Uncle Sam or the state of New Jersey. But I want to have control. I want to be flexible. I don't want something set in stone. I want to be able to move with things. I want to be protected. I want to make sure that if the unexpected happens, I'm going to be able to move with it. If my partner, business owner, dies unexpectedly, or a key person becomes disabled, my partner has a divorce. I want to be protected from all those situations and not have that disrupt the business. And then finally, I want peace of mind. I want to know that my intentions are going to be met. I want to know that I am preserving that legacy that I've worked so hard for, and that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to move forward. And it's these goals that basically are the purposes of planning early and starting the process. When we start the process early, we're able to take advantage of certain state tax planning rules and regulations that might be able to transfer more wealth than we would had we not done anything or waited to the end of the day. We're able to put things in place to protect not only ourselves but our loved ones that are ultimately going to be the benefactors of the hard work that we've had over the years. So that's kind of always the starting place, and it's always I kind of always think it's funny that basically the goals and the benefits are really so intertwined and the same, that the client almost is telling me the reasons why he should be planned early because it's his goals, and it's all kind of almost circular. The next, when I'm talking with clients, and we get to this place where we have decided that, there's a business and there's all these issues, there's all these concerns that they have that they want to move forward to protect and to plan. The initial step is a very basic due diligence, which is really, another way of saying is, be prepared and plan. And the first thing that, we have to remind everybody to do is to look at their existing governing documents and their existing agreements in their business. Do those documents meet with the reality of your business? Do you have a corporate charter that says you have to have a board of directors of 5, but you're the sole director? Do you have your biggest contract and agreement says in it that payment terms are 30 days, and but you and the other business owner that's been operating that business for 30 years have a handshake, and there's no actual contract, and you're doing things as basically you guys have done for the last 30 years, but and nobody else really knows that, and there's no documents that when a buyer comes in or the next family member or the next person in the organizational chart and management comes in that they're going to know about that. So you gotta make sure that all of that stuff is in order. Second, we gotta talk about what actually exists from a planning perspective. Do you have documents that have restrictions on transfer of ownership? Do you need to have unanimous votes on certain issues? Do you have life insurance in place on key individuals or your fellow business owners? How are they owned? What effect will that have on your overall estate plan, those life insurance policies? A big issue is always, who are the key players? So we're talking in that situation, who's in the family, who are we looking to benefit, who's in the business that may be in the family that's not, who are the key employees, what's the family situation of your partner, and what do they have in place, and who are the people that, should something unexpectedly happen, are you going to find sitting next to you at the board table trying to run this business? So knowing all of that and who's going to be a part of the situation and considering, okay, well, how are some of those key people going to react when I say, little Timmy's going to take over the business in 3 to 5 years, and guarding expectations and understanding how all of that's going to go is important with those people. And as part of that's going to be obviously, and I know everybody's kind of touched on this too, is where's the business? Are you, is it 30 years later? Are you burnt out? Or are you, ready to start a new division of the business? What's the time frame? What's your horizon? Is there something that you have planned from a business perspective that you need to keep in mind, and also take advantage of? Again, from a planning perspective, understanding that, okay, we're opening this new division, and the writing on the wall is that this is going to be a success. So now that we kind of feel that, we know that, now's the time to maybe take some planning opportunities to reduce the transfer taxes that might come associated with that ultimate transition. And with that, I am the trust and estates attorney, and so I'll give you guys, the background on those transfer taxes that play the role in my world. That we're always dealing with, and we're trying to minimize or avoid. So we have a federal estate tax. Estate tax is based on the overall value of your estate, and your estate includes, all of your assets, anything that you have control over, including life insurance policies on your life that you may own that you can control. So once you kind of have that general gross value of your estate, well, okay, now how do we determine, what are we looking at from a tax perspective? Well, the government's saying that right now, our current law is that we have $11 million of exemption. So we could pass on $11 million without any estate tax. Last year, that number was $5 million. These numbers are indexed for inflation, so that's why you'll see the not $11 million and not $5 million, the 11.18 and the 5.49 last year. So those are the exemption amounts, and the current law in 2018 that sets us at $11 million is set to sunset in 2026 to go back to the $5 million. So the way our Congress works and our state legislature works, it's always a moving target. We never know exactly what law will be in place at the time that it's relevant. So it's always important to be thinking about these issues. But essentially, to kind of put it, simplistically, essentially anything above these exemption amounts would be taxed at a 40% tax rate to the government, to the federal government. So, we have certain deductions that are available, the biggest of which is our marital deduction. So when we leave things to a spouse, that comes off, that reduces the overall taxable estate. The idea being that eventually, when that spouse passes away, the government will be able to tax the second spouse's to die estate. And we do have a law in the books called portability, which is very helpful in that, if you don't use your estate tax exemption, your surviving spouse can use it. That is not just a given. There is some planning or some tasks and acts that you have to take actually take advantage of that, but it is an advantage of our estate tax laws. So the estate tax is coupled with our gift tax. So One of the main things that I do with clients, and when we are at the point where we're talking about, preserving that wealth and the business transition and how do we do that? Well, a lot of times part of that is starting to make gifts during our lifetime and transferring that wealth so it's not there when we die. It would be nice if that gift didn't count towards the estate tax, but our legislature has got wise, and it does. So those exemption amounts that we talked about are actually unified with your gift. So the idea is basically that you can transfer wealth either during your life or at death in those amounts. So if I give my kids a $6 million gift today, and I die still holding $8 million, that means ultimately I have a $14 million estate that will be subject to an estate tax. The benefit of the spouse also is, when we talked about that unused exemption amount that you can port over to your spouse, you can also gift that. So a married couple can basically gift $22 million during their life or at death. New Jersey, since we're here in New Jersey, does not have any sort of gift tax and currently does not have any estate tax. So as far as gifting and estate tax planning goes, it's helpful to be here. We don't have to worry about those issues. New Jersey, I have to say, has an inheritance tax, which is not based on that value of the estate, but rather is based on who's receiving your assets. So even though you may not have a federal estate tax or a New Jersey estate tax, you may still be subject to an inheritance tax if you're leaving assets to people outside your immediate family. So, with all of that in the background, I mean, there's a lot of different techniques that we can use to reduce your overall federal estate and gift tax. And in order to use those, really, planning early is the key. These techniques all are, are maximized when we start the process early. There's benefits, basically, if you're a business owner and you know that, I just retained these guys that are going to increase the value of my business by another multiple and another million of EBITDA or what have you. Well, in my world, now is a time to maybe gift some of that business interest away before you start having this growth and these higher valuations. Because now you're making a gift today of $1 million, and then when you die, because you've worked with all these folks and they've increased the value, that gift of $1 million really ends up being $3 million. So now you've taken $2 million out of your estate, out of that potential 40% tax of estate tax. So there's really big benefit in doing that. And part of those benefits are things that we're allowed to use in IRS regulations, such as discounts. So when we say if we gift to our children a minority interest of 10% of our business, we're allowed to take certain discounts on that, so that $1 million business, that 10% would be $100,000 to potentially a third party. The IRS allows us to say, okay, you don't have control, you don't have, there's no marketability of that. We're going to take some discounts. So now that $100,000 gift is really $70,000 gift. So there's a lot of benefits to it. There's a lot of benefits to starting the process early so that you can create the mechanism of the gift. So ultimately that some of the children that you have aren't going to be in the business. They might have their own creditor or spending issues, and you're able to put those things in trust for the children and protect them from themselves, protect them from creditors, and make that gift really more valuable to them and to yourself to increase your legacy. And I've kind of hit on a couple of these different techniques, and I think I'm running low on time. So, one last thing I'll just talk about is that you do have the ability to gift on an annual basis to anybody that you want $15,000 a year. So that's another important tool to be using to decrease our overall estate tax liability and preserve that legacy, which is, as Ray said, ultimately when people come and see me, that's one of their biggest goals, to say, okay, I want to make sure I'm leaving as much as I possibly can to my family, or to whatever charity, to whatever individual, friend, employee, what have you. So I think that quickly goes through a very brief and macro overview of my role in the transition process.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. I think we've heard people don't fail to plan, they plan to fail, and that seems to be a recurring theme here, is preparedness and planning well in advance. So we've heard from Jeff on the advisory side, we've heard then from Ray, the wealth advisor, now we've heard from the estate tax professional. We're moving down the line here. I don't know which one's more painful for you in the audience. They're all difficult things we have to deal with, but the fact is, we teach and train our children certain things and preparing them for life, et cetera, if you're married or have kids, and yet so many of us forsake this in our business lives, and the outcomes we get shouldn't be a surprise if we didn't do the work, right? So you're seeing a theme here, preparedness, being ready, and now we're going to go to the one that seems to be the most trusted advisor is the tax, or is the CPA. So we're going to take the next few minutes with Jeanette here of Witham Brown, who's going to handle more about the business preparedness through the lens and the view of a CPA. Jeanette, real quick, by way of introduction, Jeanette is the CPA and the senior manager with Witham in the Princeton, New Jersey office, and that's Witham Smith and Brown, forgive me. She works in the transaction advisory group, hence the reason why she's on the panel. She's leveraging her 20 years of public accounting experience to provide due diligence. We hear that as well. It's the personal due diligence Ray mentioned, and even Jeff has mentioned, and then there's the corporate due diligence and the books. And I'm not a CPA, but you always hear about the books, the books clean, and so the due diligence piece is really important. She talks about quality of earnings and other advisory services to buyers, sellers, and even lenders alike. So without further ado, I'll pass along to Jeanette. She's a CPA, and she also owns the designation of a CM and AA. I'm not sure what that is, but maybe perhaps she can say that for us. And we welcome Jeanette.
Thank you. Yes, so my name is Jeanette Emmons. I am a CPA. I'm certified in the states of New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. But for those of you who may not know, they passed a Mobility Act where we can pretty much practice anywhere in the country now with one state license. Excuse me. The CM and AA is Certified Mergers and Acquisition Advisor. So that's an extra designation that we felt was beneficial to have within our transaction advisory group, giving us not just the CPA's perspective, but really that advisor's perspective on approaching a transaction and approaching value growth within a business. So that's what that was. Just a real brief discussion on Witham. We are a top 25 CPA firm. We are headquartered out of Princeton, New Jersey. We have offices up and down the East Coast from Boston to Orlando. But we are really focused and centralized within that New York to Philadelphia corridor. We have a national and a global reach. We're part of the HLB, International Affiliation of Firms. So at any given time, we're working collaboratively with firms around the globe. Excuse me. I just finished a transaction. I worked with one of the HLB affiliates in Wisconsin and in Germany together to put together a diligence report for an acquisition of a company, a set of companies within the United States for a German acquirer. So we do have that global reach. As Dan mentioned, I'm here today as the CPA. It's probably important to note when we're addressing the middle market that not all CPAs are created equal, just like not all companies are created equal. And when we look at the middle market, it's such a vast array. There's a very large group of businesses that fit within that definition. So when you're in the lower middle market, maybe closer to that 5 million of revenue, lower number of employees, you might be working with a sole practitioner, general practitioner type of CPA who's handling your accounting questions and taking care of your tax filings and maybe talking to your banker for you once or twice. That could involve compiling maybe a tax basis financial statement as opposed to your upper middle market type of companies who are more sophisticated, have higher leverage or financing needs, and have therefore transitioned maybe on to a CPA that is going to offer specialists in GAAP financial statements, international financial statements, multi-state tax issues, foreign tax issues. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. And that's part of that train that we're talking about, knowing where you are and knowing where you want to go, and when is the right time to transition up from that sole practitioner to somebody who has more depth and breadth of experience and expertise for what you need and what you want to achieve next. Comes up a lot with the attorneys. It comes up a lot with a lot of the professionals that you're going to be working with. Once you start talking about transition, you need people who know that world, know the clauses that have to be there, know what's typical practices, etc. So, all that to set the stage. The slides will be pretty quick, I think. If you haven't noticed, we do have a little bit of a theme going here, where we want you to be prepared for the future of your business and the transition of your business, because it is inevitable. So preparedness on every front is kind of just this introductory slide, where you want that team of professionals available to you, working collaboratively, giving you the expertise that you need. So we talked about personal goals and planning. Jeff definitely mentioned strength of management and getting that management team in place to remove the dependency on just the owner-run businesses. Also, he spoke about the operational goals and procedures, like you want to know where you're going and have a plan and show that the business has a trajectory with or without you going forward before you can consider transitioning away from it. And then I'll get into a little bit more about the strong reporting functions, the controls, and then normalized earnings and balance sheets and working capital. So we saw this earlier with Jeff. I'll just repeat it real quick. Generally speaking, when you're in the transaction world, people think of value as the expected future revenues or the expected future benefit stream, which is often defined as EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, times a multiple. And that's going to be your enterprise value, or what you can hope to get out of your exit from the business. So that expected future benefit stream, again, often thought of as EBITDA. It can be dependent on the specific industry that you're in, whether or not that's what they look at. If you happen to be working in an IT type of area, it's really all about reoccurring revenues, not necessarily EBITDA. It really just depends, where you are in the marketplace. But in theory, it seems kind of simple, so I can either affect EBITDA or I can affect the multiple, and that's how I'm going to affect my exit value. The benefit stream can be impacted by making changes to how you operate your business. And that can be done well, and that can be done poorly. If you're just cutting costs everywhere to hit EBITDA for a year, you're going to have a higher EBITDA for this formula, but upon diligence, you're going to drive your multiple down because they're going to see that that's not sustainable. So just bringing EBITDA up does not necessarily add value in the end when you're ready to exit. So you really have to be able to show sustainability of that revenue stream, or that ultimate bottom line. And then the multiple can be impacted by a lot of factors, which I'll talk about on the next slide. Factors like the exit channel that you choose, the industry that you're in, and again, how you've positioned your business operationally. So when I refer to an exit channel, that's, where do you believe you're going to be able to sell your business? If it's a family transition, that's going to have one value. If it's a management buyout, that's usually a different value. And then you have financial buyers like your private equity firms. They're going to have a different way that they look at your business and a different value to them. And finally, your strategics, who are often going to layer on even another factor when they look at the value of your business, which is what synergies do they expect to realize from that acquisition. And sometimes they can offer a higher value just because they're going to be able to leverage within their own business the things you already have. So the exit channel can significantly impact the value. And the owners transitioning out have to make a decision about the exit channel, but it's not always just about the value that you're going to get out of that channel. There's a lot of other factors that go in, like what do you need from the end result? I need to keep those 200 people employed. I need my business to continue and have a legacy versus I don't care if my business gets gobbled up and they lay off 100 people. I want the most dollars out. And, there's merit to both approaches. I mean, sometimes you just want to maximize that value. Your family's not in that business and you want to pass the wealth on to your family. So those are things that you have to consider when you're looking at where your multiples are going to fall and how you're going to exit the business. You have to consider, as Jeff went through, the strengths and weaknesses across the organization. Every strength adds value, every weakness could potentially erode value, depending on who's looking at the business and how they're looking at it. And they're going to see that upon due diligence. You want to focus on mitigating weaknesses and have an overall strength. You don't want to just focus on one area and say, well, my sales growth is amazing and nothing else matters. You really want to have kind of a cohesive, strong piece going forward. Most likely things that you're going to have to focus on, I think we've said it several times, you have to reduce the reliance on the owner and show that you have a sustainable business going forward, assuming you want to exit. There are situations where you're just looking for growth capital and you really want to stay and grow that business. It might be a little bit different, but regardless, you really need to have a management team in place that's helping make collaborative decisions and running that business tomorrow, when you don't feel like getting out of bed. Let's avoid getting hit by buses. I don't like that one. Or we could talk about winning the Mega Millions, I guess, right? Somebody just did that. You want to formalize operational and financial reporting practices. Some businesses grow. They start as very small businesses. They have very trusted employees working for them. As they continue to grow, everybody continues to do their job, and you never take that step back and formalize whose job is what's the functionality of your position. You really just want to, when you go under the microscope and diligence, you want to have all of that documented and available for somebody to look at and understand that you've thought this through and you know how to run your business and your business knows how to run itself. You want to think about diversifying customer base. Nothing will erode the multiple faster than a 60% concentration with one customer. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. Probably doesn't matter what exit channel you're looking at. A huge customer concentration like that just brings a ton of risk to the buyer, because if they can't sustain that relationship, then they've spent a lot of money for no value. And finally, building strategic sales growth and a plan, which kind of is related probably to diversifying your customer base. But we're really looking for that sustainable customer base, not just chasing every potential one-off sale. You want a recurring revenue stream, a strong base, and good relationships across your organization. So, driving the multiple. We talked a lot about the operational side already. As a CPA, I can talk about it. I don't have to talk about it, and we've done that today. So again, you see things here like leadership team, the corporate culture, that solid customer base and sustainable revenue streams. On the financial side, there are a lot of ducks to get in a row. You want to make sure that, again, you've documented your policies and procedures, including internal controls. You may be a small business, you may be a medium-sized business. There are always ways to segregate duties, put checks and balances in place, show that you've really put effort into making your financial statements reliable and something that a buyer can come in and really put some faith in. So having those internal controls in place really just lends itself to showing that you're running a credible practice, and it's a good way to start that discussion. You want consistently applied accounting principles and practices. So maybe you're using generally accepted accounting principles. Middle market, we probably are. Sometimes there's one or two of those pieces of GAAP that maybe you're not using because it's just too complicated for your size of business. If you're not getting an audited financial statement, that's okay. But you want to be consistent. So if you're accrual basis, you want to record your accruals every single month. Have a clean monthly cutoff because trending is going to be done on a monthly basis. And you don't want the numbers all over the place because you paid a bill 2 months early this time and then paid it 2 months late the next time. Or you forgot to do your billing, so you have no revenue this month and then doubled all of your revenue next month because, you know, your billing person finally came back to work. You don't want any of those ups and downs in your accounting practices. You want to make sure that everything's consistent, monthly closes are clean, and those monthly trends are going to be reflective of the true operation and cash flow of your business, because at the end of the day, we talk about EBITDA, but they're really looking for cash flow. They're really looking for what's the sustainable cash flow out of this business. You want to consider your need for allowances and reserves. Clean up your balance sheet. Don't have millions of dollars of obsolete inventory sitting on the books and hope you're going to get away with getting some value for it. You have to be transparent, you have to be upfront, and you have to have everything clean. So same with receivables. The first thing they're going to do is look at your receivables aging. If you have everything there sitting over 120 days and you haven't tried to follow up and you have no hope of collecting it, write it off, put the reserve on the books. Just answer the question before it's asked. And then if you're thinking about an exit and you're thinking of being in the middle market or higher middle market, it's probably time to get a reviewed financial statement or maybe even an audited financial statement. It's an expense now that's going to yield a lot of benefit later. It's a good starting point for a due diligence team. Again, it adds credibility to how you've been operating your business and how your business can operate. Very helpful if the tax returns that you file reconcile to your financial records. Sometimes that's an issue. Unfortunately, sometimes people let their accountants make entries that never make it back into their books at the end of the year. So you just really want that all seamed up and tied together when you go to market. And finally, Jeff mentioned earlier, you do need to put together a forecast. And there has to be some substance to it. You know, there's the big joke in every company that goes for sale has this hockey stick growth potential that, you know, all of a sudden sales are just going to go through the roof. If you buy it now, you're going to get all the upside, which can be true, but often is not. And, you know, they're going to look for some kind of documentation or pipeline of sales that is going to really support that being the case. And then the same for expenses. You need to make sure that you're adjusting your variable costs to follow those revenue trends and that your fixed costs are reasonably scalable to the type of growth you're projecting. And keep in mind, all of these things that we're doing, it is good business practice in general. It's extremely helpful when you're thinking about transition. It's also very beneficial if you're just looking for capital, either growth capital or whatever, if you want to take some liquidity out of the business, so you want to put some debt on the books and take the cash out so not all of your net worth is tied up in your business. All of these things are going to give you a lower cost of capital when you go to borrow and take out a loan. It's going to make that loan process faster, and it's going to hopefully show the bank that you have a lower risk and therefore a lower cost of capital. There's a lot of information on the slides, which we will share with you. I don't necessarily have to walk through every single step of this. On the future benefit stream side, there are some tangible ways to get real value out. The calculation there is going to be net income. You're going to add back any interest expense that's non-operational. You're going to add back your income taxes to put everybody on a level playing field, because depending on the corporate structure, the tax structure, that'll have a different impact for everyone. So we take that out of the value calculation. You add back non-maintenance depreciation. So if you're in a business that's capitalizing $1 million of whatever every single year because you have to develop this new something every year to keep going, that's really still just a regular operating cost of your business, and it's not appropriate to add that back to EBITDA. If you stopped doing that, you would stop getting revenue. That's the theory there. So you only add back the non-maintenance depreciation. Amortization would be attached to any intangibles. And then there's the rest of the normalizing process, looking for non-reoccurring expenses, non-operating expenses, non-reoccurring revenues, and non-operating revenues. And I have some examples of those in the blue box. The non-reoccurring revenues is one that we've seen tank a few deals. Wow, you had a really great year last year. Why was that? Well, we had this $5 million project with so-and-so. Oh, that's great. Are you going to keep doing that every year? No, that was a one-time deal. We're never going to get, that'll never happen again. Okay, well, then I can't pay you for that on a future cash flow basis. So that was an adjustment. And that actually ended up, like I said, tanking that deal. They weren't able to go through with the offer that they had made, knowing that that revenue was not sustainable. Other things that are very, very common in the marketplace, excess owner compensation. You know, you're running a business to, you know, make money and bring it home, and that's what you do. So you pay yourself a wage that might be higher than market value because that's what you do. Same with the fringe benefits. A buyer has no motivation to pay that excess compensation, and so you're going to be able to adjust down and give yourself the benefit of that normalized cost. Same with rents. A lot of people are renting their facilities from themselves. If those rents are not at fair market value, you can make an adjustment for that. That can go either way, up or down. Management gaps would be where you don't have that management team in place and they're going to have to hire somebody and they're going to have to put in what a cost would be to put that person in place. Discretionary things like charitable contributions and gifts, some non-operational things like sales of fixed assets or casualty gains and losses, all things that are going to be adjusted to normalize that business and what they can expect going forward. To the extent that you really believe you're going to approach a transaction and you have some time, maybe go ahead and adjust your compensation to market. Maybe go ahead and fix that rent to fair market value. Let the potential buyers see a true run rate for your business instead of just a bunch of adjustments. The more adjustments that are there, the more skeptical they become. And, you know, don't reach for the moon on those because they will call you on them. Normalized balance sheets. Very important upfront to identify what's going with the business and what's staying. I want my car. You can't have it. Things like that, it's really good just to, as you're cleaning up things, as you're preparing for a transition, go ahead and transfer those personal assets out of the business. Don't wait until the closing day when they say, okay, so where's the keys? And you're like, what? You can't, what? True story. Other things like, you know, if you have bonuses accruing on the books for people, go ahead and get those paid. If you have handshake agreements on, I'm going to pay you this bonus or I'm going to give you this minority interest, formalize it, get it in writing. Again, true story. 2 days before it closes, somebody knocks on the door and says, you know, they want to hire me and I don't think I can agree to these terms anymore. Really? Because I'm closing in 2 days, and if you don't go along, I've got nothing. So get them in writing, get them documented. And identify material contracts that you need to have available for review. Very important to find out what's transferable and what's not. It's going to be a real problem if your landlord suddenly says, no, they can't rent from me. And my agreement says that they can't transfer it, so now they have to renegotiate with me, and I'm going to change the terms. You want to know that up front. Working capital is a very big point of contention. I think we'll probably cover this more in the next session. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here. There's some information there in the blue box about things that typically are included in working capital. You set a target, and then you measure against the working capital at the closing date to the target, and there's usually a purchase price adjustment just to give that buyer a good starting point with the business. They need capital to run the business on the first day. Last slide. It gets more exciting every minute. We're going back to tax now. Just a couple of very high-level thoughts. Again, you need a tax advisor to really talk about anything transaction-related with the variables that come into play. Very important, though, to know your tax situation up front. What is your structure and what does it mean? C corporations have to deal with the fact that they're probably going to have double taxation. So they're going to pay a corporate level tax, and then they're going to have to put that money out to themselves individually and pay it individually. Less bad with tax reform, but still not great. S corporations have to worry about built-in gains, and partnerships have to show ordinary gains on certain types of assets. So there's a different impact for every type of entity, and again, you will see deals fall apart when you wait too long to do that calculation and then realize, well, I want $5 million out of this, and I thought my $7 million purchase price was going to get me there, but it's not. And maybe those numbers make no sense, but that's the example. And also do a compliance assessment. They're going to do tax due diligence, especially if they're doing a stock purchase, but even certain types of reporting is a concern for asset purchases. So make sure that you're in compliance with your tax filing requirements. Multi-state tax is a big deal. Sales tax is a big deal. I actually just had a deal fall apart because they weren't filing 1099s. There's no tax related to 1099s, but if you don't have all the right documents in place, there's a withholding requirement that's like, 25% of the sale? That was a big number for them. They didn't have the documents in place, and the buyer said, get that, fix that, and maybe we'll talk again. It was a huge deal too, so it was a very big disappointment. So again, take the time to talk to the appropriate, knowledgeable tax professional to do that review and make sure that you don't have those skeletons hanging out in the closet. And that is the CPA's perspective.
That's a lot of perspective. Thank you, Jeanette. It's really good stuff. Again, the theme again is preparedness, and you don't know when that day's going to come. You're going to exit ultimately. On the wealth management side, that's what we preach and teach to our clients, that our business owners are professionals in various forms. And, you want the outcome that you want, you're going to have to do the work on the front end. And I think what I heard from Jeanette, and I echoed throughout, was consistency is critical, sustainable practices are important, and it's good business today, whether you're never selling. You can run your business more efficiently, you can enjoy the business. Again, I heard that also. Some folks are tired of running the business, so they think they have to leave. But if your financial house is in order, whether it be personally, professionally, on the corporate side, I just think you have obviously a better chance of a better outcome, and or maybe enjoying the business and continuing to grow it. So, again, everyone on this panel has experienced this. They're working with clients regularly. They've done multiple transactions, dozens and hundreds of transactions for some. And these are reoccurring themes we see. And these are pain points for some, but they need to be addressed. So we're trying to highlight that today. If you didn't get that already, and we did that in the first session, we'll do that in the third. So in the fifth spot is Michael Rosendahl from PCE, the investment banker, probably the guys you all want to hear from, because Michael's the guy typically through the whole process, but at the end, you're really going to need his expertise. Michael, as I said, was a PCE. It's a shop based out of Winter Park, Florida, but he happens to be the managing partner here in the tri-state New York region here. Michael has closed over $1 billion in transactions on the M&A side throughout his career. He's got an expertise in trucking and distribution, heavy transportation, and manufacturing, individual manufacturing organizations. And Michael has an extensive, 20-plus year background in middle market M&A work. And without further ado, Michael from PCE, and he'll give us the investment banker's view. And then we'll go on to questions and answers at some point at the very end. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Dan. I'm a little disappointed. You didn't ask me about my designation at the end.
Oh, Michael. Oh, I'm sorry. Michael is a CFA,
Thank
Chartered
you.
Financial. I forget that. And he's,
No, 2 points I just wanted to bring up on Jeanette's that were sort of critical. One, she mentioned, is the working capital. And a lot of people, they have a company and they say, I don't need $5 million of working capital to run my business. And so therefore, I think I should be able to take, $2 million out because I only need $3 million. Well, a buyer's not going to do that. They need to show that you can run your business at $3 million in working capital. So if you're really preparing, make those changes and prepare and run your business at that lower working capital level. And the other piece, and I think Jeanette hit on something really, really important, is if you're a C corporation, convert to an S. The attorneys can speak to it much better than I can, but I can't think of a good reason for a privately owned business to be a C corporation. You pay more in taxes. S corporation or an LLC gives you a lot more flexibility in how you transfer the wealth to yourself at the end of the year.
Any good tax professional will tell you it depends.
It depends. I've yet to see an example, so I would say if you are a C corporation, speak to your advisor and really consider converting to an S. So when you're thinking about considering, when do I want to sell my company, it's really where are you in a business? There are all these inflection points that people have. Do I invest and expand, or do I want to sell today? And most business owners have to make that decision. When they come to me, a lot of times they're ready to sell. But when they're speaking to the other people on this panel, many times they're at that first point. They're making that decision. Do I want to invest and expand and grow my business? And it's really important for you to go through that assessment to see where you are personally before you make a decision and go through the sale process. Determine what your objectives before you begin the sale process. It's critical. Price. What do you think your company's worth? What is the value of your company? You need to make sure that that makes sense to you personally, and you have a realistic view of value before you go into the process. You don't want to try to sell your company if you think your business is worth $100 million, when in reality it's worth $50 million, because you're not going to be satisfied with the outcome. Timing. When do you want to sell your business? What is the outcome? Is your horizon 6 months, 9 months, 5 years, 10 years? As you've heard multiple times today, prepare. Run your business like you're trying to sell it. It's the best thing you can do. You'll start working towards maximizing the value, which in the end, whether or not you even sell your business, is going to enhance your value and bring more value to you personally. What are your goals? I think a strong understanding of your personal goals. What do you want financially? Speak to a guy like Ray to understand what do you need, after my sale, so that I can live the kind of life that I want to live. Many times, a lot of business owners, they don't take that into account. They know, they've got a lot of money, they've been successful, but they haven't really gone through the estate planning purpose or the financial planning purpose to the practice to understand what they need. What do you want to do personally? Do you want to work for 6 months, 12 months, a year? There's a lot you can do to prepare to make sure that you can meet those personal objectives. What kind of buyer do you want? Do you want to find a financial buyer that allow you to take some money off the table, maybe to continue working, help grow the company, and sell again? Would you like a strategic buyer that allows you a much faster exit from your business? The sale process. How do I prepare? What can I do to make this process as smooth as possible? I think we've covered a lot of important pieces here about the steps that you can take to really make the sale process smooth. The preparation you undertake in the 6 to 12 months before you sell the company is critical to making sure the sale process goes smooth. And if you want to go further back, to Jeff, to everybody's points, all you're doing is adding value by taking the steps. And at the end of the day, that's what's most important to you, is finding an outcome that gets you the most value, whether that's dollars or finding the right buyer who's going to take care of your employees. All of these things are very valuable to the owner. And then post-transaction, what do you want? What is your role? You really need to think this through so that when you go into the sales process, you have all your objectives laid out for you, and that when the transaction closes and you look back at it, you feel satisfied with the outcome. What makes a business saleable? We've touched on a lot of these. It's lack of customer concentration, strong second tier of management, strong relationships with vendors. How are your industries performing? Having clean financials. These are all critical because all of this is going to be inspected thoroughly by the buyer. They want to make sure that your business can not only continue doing what it is today, but that it can grow. They don't want to see an annuity. They want to see something that is a business that's at generating $50 million in revenue today, but how do I get it to $75 to $100 million in revenue? And how do I make that company more profitable than it is today? If the buyer can't see a plan to making that business more profitable and growing, and it's going to be a much more challenging sale. Pre-sale planning. What do you need to do? Build an experienced team of advisors. I know that's very self-serving here, but it is critical. Having the people who can tell you what you need to do to prepare, making sure that your financial statements are correct, making sure that all your legal documentation is in place, that your agreements are, all the vendor relationships, customer relationships, all those agreements that you have in place, that they say that you want them to say, that there's no hidden clauses in there that are going to be a problem down the road. What we've seen sometimes, there are industries where suppliers want to have the ability to buy up their distribution network, and they put in a clause that allows them to match any purchase price out there. Well, sometimes the owner realizes that it is in there, and sometimes they don't. It's a clause that we don't like because it makes the sale much harder. If a buyer is much more reluctant to move forward with the whole due diligence process, if they know that at the end of the day, there's someone else who can come in and they can match their price, and they spend all this time and all this money and effort and not be successful. We want to give you the best path to success, and trying to minimize those types of terms is critical. Lock in key employees. If you have key salespeople, if you have key operational people or financial people, make sure that they're in place. You want to make sure you have that second layer of management that's able to run the business. I had one business owner who had tremendous sight into the vision to what he wanted to do. 5 years out, he said, I'm going to transition myself away from this business because when I sell, I want to retire. He told his key people, this is what I'm doing. He allowed handed over the reins of the company, and they were running the business on a day-to-day basis. And then when the company sold, he was able to transition out very smoothly. So it provided a nice outcome for him. If you have intellectual property, it's critical that you have it secured and that you have good either patent or protections in place so that a buyer feels comfortable that they will be able to utilize and maximize the value of that intellectual property. If you haven't had that reviewed by an IP attorney, it's critical that you go through that before you go through the process. Clean financial statements. I think Jeanette pointed out a lot of great points about what you need to do to clean up your financials and make sure that when you go out for the sale process, that there are going to be hidden issues that are going to come out that will only hurt value. Because at the end of the day, everybody's looking at the numbers. If you think you're saying it's $5 million in EBITDA and they go through the review and it's only $3 million, well, there's going to be adjustment in the purchase price, and you want to avoid that. Any outstanding legal issues? If you have lawsuits, it's not uncommon for business owners to be sued at some point. Try to resolve them. Try to minimize them. You're going to have to indemnify any buyer against them anyway. So try to resolve those kinds of any type of legal issues before you get into the process. And then, again, determine what you think your post-transaction role is. And be very upfront about it. With buyers, as long as you tell them what you want to do, they will most likely want to work with you towards that goal. It's just you need to be upfront, and everybody needs to understand what that role is before you enter into a letter of intent, or even before they even place a bid on your company. Jeanette, I'll only gloss over this, but this is critical. Making sure and it goes both ways. You want to make sure you're taking out all the items that are non-recurring or owner expenses that are run through. Make sure that owner's compensation is normalized, but also making sure those one-time items that go in either direction are added back to show really normalized profit, because it will come out. There's no way around it. Manage the company's investments. I mentioned working capital before, but which is critical. Reduce your capital expenditures going into it. A lot of companies, especially capital-intensive companies, you're not going to get the true value of any investments you make in your company less than 12 months before sale. You want to make sure that those expenditures are made, and you can get 12 months of revenue and profitability into your financial statements. If you have underperforming assets, sell them. Get them off the balance sheet. A lot of times, especially in capital-intensive industries, what we'll hear is, I have, $100 million worth of assets. I can't sell my company for $75 million. Well, a lot of those assets are sitting around and they might not be doing anything. Sell them, get the cash, because you get to keep the cash when you sell the company. So that's where you're going to create that value. Avoid hiring expensive employees during or right before the process. If you're going to go out and hire real high-quality employees who are going to make an impact on the business, get those people in place where they can really have that impact on the business. You want to get them a good 12 months prior to selling your business, so you can get that if they're a key salesperson, so they can generate that type of revenue you need, or if they can make operational changes that will add enhanced value, reduce expenses, make sure they're there and they're in place and that their impact can be felt. Avoid due diligence disasters. This is critical. I mean, I am making light of it with the Three Stooges, but this is what you look like when you go through due diligence and you're not prepared and you haven't been upfront. What are some of the issues you can avoid? Number one, don't miss your projections. It is probably the single biggest cause of purchase price changes that we see. An owner will come out and say, I'm going to generate so much in revenue and profitability this year because, as Jeanette mentioned, they're going into, they got that hockey stick. Unless you can really back it up, show a nice progression in your profitability and your revenue. It's better to adjust your projections upwards and have a nice surprise in that direction than to lower your projections and you have to explain why you're lowering your projections. Overly aggressive add backs. Avoid that at all costs. Not everything can be adjusted out. One of the biggest ones we see is people try to say, I overpay my employees. Well, no buyer wants to come in and say, I'm cutting employee pay by 30% because you've been overpaid. It's not an add back that buyers are going to accept, and it's something that once due diligence begins, you're going to get dinged on by the buyer. Poor financial information, quality of earnings. I think we've covered that pretty extensively, but if you don't feel like you have good financial statements before beginning this process, consider going through the quality of earnings process yourself. It'll uncover any issues, and then you can hand that report to a buyer and say, here, this accounting firm has gone through my earnings and said this is what it is. They're backed up, so that $5 million in EBITDA or $10 million in EBITDA is a real number. If you have unresolved or undiscovered environmental issues, that can be a very big issue. If you're an industrial company, you have any sort of chemicals, fuels that are on your property, there can almost certainly be an issue, especially if you had a leak at some point. If you want to be knowledgeable of them, you want to be upfront about them, and if there's anything you can do to mitigate those issues beforehand, go through that process. And then, one of the key ones, when you're going through the sale process, while it is a long process, it takes 6 to 9 months, if you're not able to respond to buyers quickly and provide them the information they want, it shows a lack of organization at the company that's trying to sell, and it doesn't look good. And you want to be able to respond quickly. So have the infrastructure in place, think ahead, have access to the documents that you need and the information that you need so you can respond in a very timely manner to buyers. And then, with the last piece, develop an exit strategy. What do you want to do? There are a lot of different paths that you can take: sale to strategic buyer, private equity, leverage recap, ESOP, management buyout, IPO. Probably not so much for this audience, but think about what is the path that you think is best for you, or two paths, and try to follow them. You can follow them simultaneously and see which provides you the best result. We have what we often take buyers through, what we call a dual track. We'll go through a sale to a strategic buyer or a financial buyer, but we'll also show them what an ESOP could do at the same time. And what that does, it gives them more options. And at the end of the day, the seller wants options. They want to know what their value is, how their employees are going to be treated, what's going to be the best option for them. What they think going into the process might not be what they decide to go with at the end, because they see something better or something they didn't think of came up that moved their opinion from choice A to choice B. So it's always good to have options.
That's it, Michael, huh?
That's it.
Wow. Quick question for me, or two, real quick. You're the investment banker, as we mentioned from the outset. What do you think, if you could, one point, from your view as the investment banker, is the most critical piece that you would address an owner that's considering transition or in the throes of a transition?
Sure. I'd say the number one would have your financial statements. I mean, everything goes back to your financials and your financial performance. If they're not clean and they're not in order, there's no shortage of issues you're going to have.
Okay. And then-
Other items, we can find ways to work with you and try to mitigate them, but poor financial reporting is the biggest issue.
I think Jeanette would echo that, right?
Absolutely.
Perhaps the whole panel would make it easier for everybody, right? And then lastly, Michael, where do you come in? You spoke last year today, and not that this was sequential for a reason, but when should an investment banker like yourself be in? When should an owner or other advisors who are advising owners, when should we introduce someone like yourself into the equation?
Ideally, we're speaking to someone 5 years before they want to sell, maybe more. I mean, a lot of the people we speak to, we've had relationships with, for 5-10 years. We want to give you advice. This is advice we give away for free. We want you to be smarter that when you sell your business, and we want you to take the step because, hey, we're with you. We want you to be more valuable when you sell. I mean, it's in our interest, it's in your interest. We want to give you the advice and for you to take the steps and to speak to the professionals so that when you really do sell, you can maximize your value and that you feel prepared personally as well from when you sell.
So it's never too early to get you involved?
No.
Excellent. Okay. Well, folks, it's been a great session here, session 2 of Business Succession Forum. The floor is open for a couple question and answers. If you have mics in front of you, it makes it a little easier for the recording, and also for the folks that are going to watch this broadcast via webinar at a later date and time. So if there's open questions to the floor, if anyone wants to ask, don't be afraid. Don't jump at once. We've done all the talking. You've done all the listening. Perhaps now we'd like to be on the other side of that and answer any questions you may have.
Dan, I want to add one or two things
Sure.
that we didn't cover, because we covered a lot of the similar stuff. I just want to point out to business owners, there's two things that we didn't talk about that I think you should also consider as part of the preparedness. One is treating your business from a lifestyle income to a value-based business. So we see it all the time where business owners, let's say for an example, they're pulling out $500,000-600,000 a year, okay? And they've adjusted their lifestyle to that. And now when you look to go sell the business, they get worried because the value may not be there to sustain that lifestyle. So they think, I got to work 5, 7, 8 more years to pull out what I'm pulling out. You have to consider the business as a value-based business, and it may cost you some money, and you may have to take a little bit lower over the last 1 or 2 years to invest in some infrastructure, whatever the case may be, that will add the value, and you'll get it on the back end. So that was one point that wasn't mentioned. The other was, as we've all been talking, let's face it, there's a cost to a transition with dealing with advisors, and we haven't talked about that today. And realistically, I mean, and we can all speak to this, I think you're looking anywhere from 5 to 8 or 9% of the value of the transaction by the time you're done with all these different types of advisors. I will say this, it's like selling your house. You use a real estate agent. They're taking 4 or 5% off the top. You could sell it yourself and save that 4 or 5%, but A, do you want that hassle? And B, are you going to sell it for, are you going to get as much for it as the professional? So bear in mind that there are costs, to doing the transition, but it should be, if it's prepared and done well, a smart spend. If you're spending 7% of that deal, but you've earned an extra X million dollars because of the work that's been done with the advisors, it's a terrific spend, and it's going to happen anyway. You know, the lawyer, you need the lawyer at the time of the transition. You need the attorney and the tax work. You need just about everybody, and it's going to be there. But but you should be getting a ton of value from the advisors for that spend, but it can be a significant number, so.
Well said. Anyone else on the panel, closing remarks from the panel, or we'll open up to the floor before we wrap up, and I'll give you a couple of housekeeping items for the next time we get together. Anyone dare to brave a question?
I have a quick question
Sure, if you put on your mic kindly.
for Jeanette. You mentioned sustainable, do I sound good? For sustainable EBITDA and cash flow. So if you have a potential buyer come look at your business, are they looking back for, is it 3 years? Is there a time frame? Because it kind of happened to my business where now we're sustaining cash flow and the EBIT is more consistent. So is there a time frame they look at?
I mean, typically, the historical quality of earnings is going to go back at least 3 full years, plus the interim period that you're currently in. So that's the look back. That doesn't mean the business had to be running the same for that whole period, but that's kind of the baseline where they're looking at what it is, and then you have to have really just a solid plan and pipeline and whatever you need to kind of supplement that to show your growth. So obviously, they want growth, they want to see you growing. That's a sign of a healthy business that's going to give them more value later. So they're not just looking for a business that's operating the same all the time. But you want to have that consistent, hopeful trajectory over that 3-year period going forward, so that you can show that, again, the procedures and policies that you've built, the relationships that you've built sustain that business
Thank you.
going forward.
Any other takers?
I'd add to that also. So sometimes those numbers are skewed by infrastructure spend a few years earlier, and you're only starting to reap that. That's why normalizing those earnings are so important too when it's done. And also, you know, on the go-forward basis as well, in the projections is where you capitalize from that as well in terms of having that information as to why you're growing. So it can go both ways, but in terms of what's on the books, as long as there's an explanation to everything and some support behind it, in and of itself, that adds value. Right, so if you have a story and it's legitimate and you're telling the truth and you're sticking to it, and you can provide the proof, that in and of itself, as Michael just said, there's value to that because you're proving to owners that you have the handle of the pulse of your business on top of the earnings.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice?
Yeah, Dan.
Yes, please.
I'd just like to say, the overriding theme throughout today's presentation, and primarily the first presentation, was from a sell-side perspective. We were talking about exit planning and selling. The professionals that spoke today and spoke the first session and again in the third session also do buy-side work. So we also help people take businesses that are a $3 to $5, $7 million EBITDA number that are valued at a 3 to 5 multiple, and through acquisitions, allow them to get higher multiples. Everybody loves organic growth because it's cheap, but acquisition growth is quicker and leads to higher multiples in a short period of time.
Well said. Anyone else on the panel? Closing thoughts? All right, well, we're thankful for everyone that came today. Those that are watching via webinar, we'll get that out to you through a link. So our first was on October 4th. We met in this very same room. It was a Thursday, and that was the overview, basically, of succession planning from a macro view. Talked about the state of the union in terms of the markets. It's obviously a hot market. We have some ripples in the economy, not ripples in the economy, but some volatility in the regular global stock markets. But timing is great from all the professionals that spoke at the previous engagement. It's still a great time. There's always being prepared, regardless if it's a good market cycle or not. It will serve you well. Today was really, again, preparedness, right? We've beaten that to a death here, and we're killing it, right? But it is about preparedness. We see the value there. I think every panelist actually really drilled that home for a good reason. And then our next visit will be here again, wrapping up our 3-part series, and that's going to be executing the transition and life after the plan. So we've given you an overview. We've talked about preparedness, beat you to death over the head about preparedness. You're all going to leave going, preparedness, I hope. That's the messaging. And then on the 15th of November, right before the holidays, same time, same place, here at Keene University in this lovely facility here. Thank you to the tech folks and everyone who's helped us get this pulled off. Executing the transition plan. We can get you there, right? So we get you to the dance. Now, how do we actually exit the dance? And then the life thereafter, the personal side of what life might be like. And I think every member of this panel can play a role in that, and we'll discuss that next time we meet on November 15th here at 8 o'clock for networking and light refreshment. And then, of course, after now we wrap up, you're available to go outside, have a bite if there's some food left. Thank you for being here. And also, if you want to speak to someone privately, some of this stuff is personal in nature when you own a business, right? It's a member of your family. It's, and sometimes it's what I'm looking for. It's, you want to be held in confidence. You don't want all your public data to be out there. So we applaud those that came here that do own businesses and would share their thoughts with us publicly. But if there's a private question, just address someone. We all have cards here. It's not a sales pitch. It's just a discussion exchange. And like we said, it's a collaborative panel of experts here. And our goal is to help folks like yourselves to achieve your goals. If you achieve yours, each one of those members of the panel that might play a role in that will achieve theirs as well. So that's really it for today. Thank you all for coming. Safe travel. Hope to see many of you back. Pre-register if you would. If you're going to come back on the 15th, we'd like you to come. Also encourage people that they didn't come, they can still come because they can view the webinar for 1 and 2. And if you've missed those in person, doesn't mean you shouldn't show up for the third one, because I think the exit and the transition to life thereafter is the most exciting one, if you ask me. So look forward to seeing you all back here on the 15th of November at 8 o'clock. Thank you.